Occultus. This is DM Nell, and I'm back with another Shadow Talk. And this one is episode 164, and we're going to be talking about the Demon Lord Engine Rules Compendium today. That's the main topic. But before we get to that, let's take a look at what Schwab has released over the last week. So not much. But we do have a new entry in the Rage of the Goblin King saga. This is Rage of the Goblin King 3, 5 Temples of Fetch. And so what do we expect from it? Priceless treasures are vanishing from Seahold, and the blame falls on the enigmatic cult of Fetch. You're called upon to uncover the truth behind these magical heists, clear a cult's name, and confront the masterminds threatening the city's wealthiest. All right, so it looks like we are going to the city of Seahold, which my party has not entered as of yet. So this is an adventure for the Shadow of the Weird Wizard. So if you're playing that game, then you've got another entry in this adventure path. Okay, so this is for expert adventures, incidentally. So be on the lookout for that. I believe it should be out there in Drive-Thru RPG by the PDF. Link is here in Schwab Entertainment. So there you go. All right, so enough of that. Let's talk about the main topic. And our main topic today is the Demon Lord Engine Rules Compendium. Now, this was a surprise. I had not heard anything about this. Evidently, Robert Schwab did talk about it in his Discord channel and maybe in Facebook or one of those other social media platforms. But I had heard about it just basically the day before it was released. So I was really kind of interested in what this might be. And I was curious because I had no idea what it could be, because we already have the Demon Lord core rulebook. We've got the Shadow the Weird Wizard core rulebook. We've got Punk Apocalyptic core rulebook. We've got Godless, which is not a core rule book. Well, more on that later. So we already had 3 versions of the Demon Lord engine that had been released. So I was really curious what this could be. And after reading the social media post, I believe it was on Discord, I got a better idea of what it was going to be. Still not super clear, but I will be talking about what I think the purpose of this is, and where it's going to go from here. And then we'll also talk about what's in it. What does this offer? Do you need to buy it? So first of all, let's talk about the purpose of this. So as I mentioned just a moment ago, we already have several versions of the Demon Lord engine games that have been released. Shadow of the Demon Lord was released back in 2015, I want to say. And there was a big Kickstarter for it, tons of supplements, stuff still coming out for Shadow of the Demon Lord. Then we had some other things that came out. Like I mentioned, Godless was one of the releases, not actually part of the Demon Lord core world, but it still used the Demon Lord engine. Then we had Punk Apocalyptic come out, which was, well, let me back up. Godless was kind of like a post-apocalyptic world, but it used the Demon Lord rules. Then we had Punk Apocalyptic come out, which was different than Godless. Different than the Shadow of the Demon Lord in that it did not utilize the exact same rule set. In fact, it kind of expanded on and modified the core rules somewhat for Punk Apocalyptic. And just as an example, it had 8 ability scores rather than the normal 4 ability scores that Shadow the Demon Lord presented. So Punk Apocalyptic was an offshoot of the Demon Lord engine. Still mostly Demon Lord engine. In other words, it still had boons and banes and still utilized the same core concepts, but it did, make some changes. And so it's kind of its own side thing. Then we had Shadow the Weird Wizard, which just recently came out. And it is, again, a variation of the Demon Lord engine. It has some differences from Shadow the Demon Lord, which I've talked about in other videos. And so, now that we've had these 3 versions of the Shadow of the Demon Lord engine, or the Demon Lord engine, what could this possibly be? Well, based on what Schwab said in his social media post, he's wanting to put out new games and new worlds that utilize the Demon Lord engine, but he didn't want to necessarily have to, start from scratch every time, like he did with Shadow the Demon Lord and the others. So instead, what he did was he created this Demon Lord engine rules compendium, which is basically the core rules that he plans on using going forward for any new games that he comes up with. And, I'm sure he probably leaves himself some wiggle room there to come up with something totally different if he wants to. But it looks like, for at least the foreseeable future, he's got several games in mind that he wants to use the Demon Lord engine for. So that's the whole purpose here. So my guess is that he's probably not planning on doing a full-on Kickstarter for these new games that are coming out. I could be wrong, but it sounds like since he's already released the core rules that these games will be using, it's just really a matter of him just releasing the details for these future games that are specific to those games. So Godless is kind of an example, I think, of what he is, the model that he's planning on using going forward. So this is Godless, and this is solidly based on the Shadow of the Demon Lord rules. But it does have nuances to it that are different than Shadow of the Demon Lord. So, for example, it still utilizes the novice, the expert, and the master tier paths from Shadow of the Demon Lord, but it modifies them. It changes things in this book. Okay, so let's just quickly go through the Godless book. So it starts off chapter 1 with backgrounds. Okay. And these are specific to this setting. So we have Awakened, Builder, Deluded, Freak, Genius, Parasite, Psycho, Savage, Scavenger, and Wanderer. Then we have Ancestries, which are similar to what we had in Shadow of the Demon Lord. Humans, Changeling, Dwarf, Goblin, Orc. And so a new one called a Transcendent. Well, let's see here. I'm not sure if the Transcendent is the, yeah, it's called differently, but it's kind of like the Clockwork Ancestry. It is a mechanical person. And then it talks about some other ancestries in here: mutants, aliens, and other realities. Goes into professions, which again are specific to the setting. You've got Fanatic, Wisdom, Killer, Savage, Scumbag, Wretched. And then it goes into gear. Now the gear that's listed in here is, again, specific to this setting. but some of it is similar to what is in Shadow of the Demon Lord. So you do have your basic weapons, hammer, hatchet, butcher knife, sword, axe, um, bows, arrows, but you also include things like revolver and crowbar and dynamite. So you have things added to what the Shadow of the Demon Lord rules had, because this is a post-apocalyptic Earth, EARTH, um, setting. Okay, so then you go into the paths, and it's got a section here for paths, and it says, these are some modifications that you can make to the Shadow of the Demon Lord paths so it fits into the godless world. And so you still have the magician, you still have the rogue, you still have the warrior, and you still have the priest. But then it goes into expert paths, and these expert paths are specific to this setting. So you have the grease monkey, you've got the preacher, you've got the raider, you've got the road warrior, and then you go into master paths. So you've got the bone picker, the daredevil, the gunslinger, the pyromaniac, and that's all it offers for master paths. Then you go into, it talks about magic, how magic could be translated into this setting. And then it goes into mutations. We've got some spells that are specific to this setting. Then the next section is Chapter 2, Gear. And so this is where you come into more specific to the setting for equipment. So you've got something called salvage, which is how you survive by trading salvage, finding salvage, and different things like batteries, electrical parts, food, fuel, mechanical parts, medicine, and water. And then you get into weapons, and of course, when you're talking about weapons, you have things like machine guns, grenade launchers, machine pistols, rifles, shotguns, submachine guns, stuff like that. Then we talk about special weapons like flamethrower, pepper spray, rocket launcher, stun baton. Then we have a section on explosives. Then you have a section on armor and clothing. Okay, so this is not a godless video, but I say all this because this, I think, is an example of what the future settings are going to look like for the Demon Lord engine. So we have the core rules here for the Demon Lord engine, rules compendium, and then he's going to release things like I believe one of the settings he wants to release is for the Red Moon of the Shadow of the Demon Lord world. He also wants to release a different setting for Shadow of the Demon Lord that's like 666 years in the future. He's talked about wanting to do a setting that is in the far future. Basically he could really use this as the Demon Lord engine as a generic rule set, and then create different settings that have that are in different genres. So if you wanted to do a modern like a modern fantasy setting, say like the Dresden Files, he could very easily do that in the same way that he did Godless. Or if you wanted to do a Weird West setting, or if you wanted to do a what else is there? I don't know. Just any genre you can think of, he could use the Demon Lord engine rules compendium as the baseline, and then just create these godless-like setting books that have the details that go along with the rules compendium that are specific to that setting. And then he could continue to release, to expand on the setting, he could continue to release different supplements for that setting. So he hasn't done that with Godless. He did release some adventures for Godless, but he didn't release any additional setting material at least not that I can think of off the top of my head, for Godless. But I could very easily see him doing that if this is the model that he's actually going to utilize going forward. Now, again, this is just a guess on my part based on what little information he provided prior to releasing the Demon Lord engine, but I think that is his plan. Now, are there going to be Kickstarters for these new settings and these new games he's wanting to put out? I have no idea. Um, Maybe. I mean, all of these are going to require art and they're going to require editing and all the stuff that goes into creating a book is still going to have to be funded. And since Schwab is a one-man show, I'm sure he's still going to need to, raise funds in order to release these. But I don't think it would have to be to the same degree as the Kickstarters that he's done in the past. It might be something shorter and smaller, like what he did with Occult Philosophy for Shadow of the Demon Lord, or for Free. What was it? Free. All I can think of is Freebird. Um, the pirate setting. It'll come to me later. Anyway, the he might do the smaller um, Kickstarters. Which actually would probably be better and faster and have a faster turnaround, I think, than these huge ones. So for the Shadow of the Weird Wizard, I think we'll probably be getting stuff for that for probably in the next couple of years. We're still getting stuff from the original Shadow of the Demon Lord, and that's 10 years old now. Of course, that had to do with him taking over the work that the Black Star Studio was supposed to be doing, which I'm sure he didn't anticipate having to do originally when he did the Shadow of the Demon Lord, or when Black Star did the Black Star Kickstarter. I'm sure Schwab didn't anticipate having to take that over. But still, that's part of, Shadow of the Demon Lord, and we're still getting stuff for that, is my point. So, yeah, I think that's where we're going with the Demon Lord Engine Rules Compendium. So, interested to see what's going to happen. Yeah, anyway, having said all that, now let's talk about the Demon Lord Engine Rules Compendium itself. Why are we getting this? If we already have 3 iterations of the Demon Lord rules, why do we need yet another iteration? Well, I think this is Schwab's way of updating the rules without updating the rules. He's always said that he didn't want to do a second edition of Shadow of the Demon Lord. And I think he's really wanting to kind of stick to that, but at the same time, things change, things evolve. Shadow of the Demon Lord rules engine is 10 years old now. Shadow of the Weird Wizard had some innovations in it, as did Punk Apocalyptic. So it's kind of, probably not a good idea to put a stake in the ground and say, I'm never going to do a Demon Lord second edition, and yet have all these new ideas, new innovations come up as you progress and not be able to make changes. So I think this is his way of doing a second edition without making a second edition. I don't think he plans on changing or going back and changing Shadow of the Demon Lord. I think the Shadow of the Demon Lord game that we have is what we're going to have forever. And he's going to continue to release things for that game, also for his other games. So I think that the Demon Lord engine is primarily going to be used for future games. Now, that's not to say that you probably couldn't take some of these concepts and retrofit them into the already published games. I don't see why you couldn't do that. But if you don't want to do that, you still have the original games as they were produced. I don't ever plan on using the Demon Lord Engine Rules Compendium to modify the original Shadow of the Demon Lord games. If I'm going to continue running games in Shadow of the Demon Lord, it's going to be for Shadow of the Demon Lord, and it's going to be using the original rules. Now, may I bring a couple of innovations into the game? Maybe. It's possible. Anything could happen. I already kind of did that in one of my Shadow of the Demon Lord games with a supplement that came out for Shadow of the Demon Lord. I changed the magic system to be you have to make a spell check roll in order to cast spells. I forget what the name of that supplement was, but anyway, it was kind of similar to the spell casting rules that are used in like Shadow Dark and in Dungeon Crawl Classic. So I was interested in trying that out in the Shadow of the Demon Lord. Will I continue to use that? I don't know, maybe not. I didn't really dig it when I utilized it in that campaign. But anyway, I digress. So let's talk about what's in the Demon Lord Engine Rules Compendium. So this is I forget how many pages. It's not a very big supplement. It has, including the index, it has 29 pages. So it's very concise. But it also doesn't have a lot of the rules that you find in the core rulebook. And so this is truly just the basic core rules. So if you want to make a comparison, it's kind of similar, but even more basic than the basic D&D rules that they put out for the original 5th edition, which was a PDF, and it just really contained just the bare bones of the 5th edition rule set. But it did have the basic core classes included. This does not have any paths. The Demon Lord Rules Engine does not have any paths in it whatsoever. Doesn't have any ancestries in it whatsoever. It just has the rules, baby. That's it. So if we are going to have ancestries, and if we're going to have novice and expert and master paths, and a magic system or a technology system, or whatever the genre needs, it's going to be included in whatever setting book he releases for future games. So this only provides the core underlying rules for those games that will be coming out in the future. So what do we have here? So we have the introduction, which kind of goes over some of what I've been talking about. Deciding what happens just gives you the basic information: how to make action rolls, how to make luck rolls, boons and banes, and then how to deal with critical results. It talks about time, which we'll get into all this as we go through this. Measurement, level and tier. So it talks about level and tier, but you don't actually have any paths in this, as I already mentioned. Then it talks about the character traits: attributes, perception, defense, health, courage, speed, size, and temporary traits. Then we have extended effort. So this means what you're doing on your downtime, such as resting, traveling, and it also has a discussion about chases. Then it talks about using your senses. Sound and illumination are the two things that are highlighted here. Then you have how you deal with knowledge, and goes into expertise, which we'll talk about. Then we have objects. So you have object traits: interacting with objects, carried and worn objects, animated objects, sentient objects, common objects, digging and excavation, and hazards. Then we talk about communication, talks about language, has an optional role in here, which is character bonds, disposition, and action rolls in social situations. So how Shadow of the Demon Lord and Weird Wizard and maybe Punk Apocalyptic had a social combat is what it was called in those games, I think. At least in Demon Lord I know it is called social combat. This also has action rolls in social situations. Then we have the combat roles. So rounds in combat, moving combat, actions, reactions, free actions, attacking, aerial combat, aquatic combat, mounts, and vehicles. Um, and these are very generic. In other words, it doesn't frame these in a fantasy setting. And again, this is purposeful because we want to be able to use these rules in any type of genre. Talks about enemies and gives the what a enemy stat block or an NPC stat block would look like. Not what it looked like, but what it would entail. And then you have an index. Okay, so one thing I want to mention right off the bat is that this does not have a character sheet associated with it, which I kind of think he should have given us like a generic character sheet, but he didn't. If I imagine we'll probably get a character sheet for whatever settings he creates going forward. So that's one thing that unfortunately is not included in here. I did create my own character sheet. And I did this more so I can understand how the various parts of the rules fit together, and building the character sheet as I went through the rules compendium kind of helped me do that. So it's a very basic character sheet, but I think it contains everything that the rules would require for any generic game. So yeah, so that's what I did. Okay. All right, so let's go through this thing. What is in here? So I'm not going to go through the introduction. Deciding what happens, this talks about a lot of terminology. So what's an action roll? What's a target number? What's a luck roll? What's boons and banes? And if you know the Demon Lord engine, you already know all this stuff. Luck rolls was introduced in Shadow the Weird Wizard. So if you know that game, then you know what a luck roll is. So all that is discussed here because these will be features of the future games as well. So already we're adding a change from the original Shadow the Demon Lord engine by incorporating the Shadow the Weird Wizard luck rolls into future games. You have critical results, which does not change from what has been used in the past. It talks about time. You have rounds and you have turns. Measurement is in inches, feet, yards, and miles. In combat, rules describe distances in yards. Feel free to convert to the metric system. 1 meter is 1.094 yards, which is close enough. You have levels and tiers. Whoops. You have levels and tiers. So you have 0 level in here, which is a starting tier. Levels 1 to 2 is still the novice. So this has not changed. What is interesting, though, is that he included 11 plus for the Paragon tier. So both Demon Lord and Weird Wizard have Paragon, but it was kind of tacked on. Well, actually, Paragon is included in the core rulebook for Weird Wizard, but it was an add-on for Shadow the Demon Lord. Now it becomes part of the core. So if you want to adventure past the Master tier, this allows for that with the Paragon tier. And it just says 11 plus. It doesn't go into each level after level 11. Now, is that to say that the future games he puts out could do that? Of course it could. Or it could ignore the Paragon tier altogether. And it could also ignore the starting tier altogether, just like Shadow the Weird Wizard, I think makes it an option rather than part of the core rules like Shadow the Demon Lord does. Okay, so then we have the traits, and we talk about the various attributes. And you still have the core 4, strength, agility, intellect, and will. The modifiers are still calculated the same way. The next page goes into perception, and it talks about having a perception attribute, and this is a difference from Shadow the Weird Wizard. Shadow the Weird Wizard does not have a perception attribute. However, the Shadow the Demon Lord does. So we now have perception as an attribute going forward, and I incorporated that into my character sheet here to call that out. All right, so we have perception as an attribute. Then you have your senses. Your senses include sight and sound, obviously, and smell and all that stuff. But it goes into awareness, talks about dark vision, talks about other senses, which would be a descriptor and the sense. The creature knows the location of the thing described within a distance of 5 yards, utilizing whatever this sense could be. And then you have true vision, which is defined here. Now, you could incorporate additional senses into future games, but these are the core senses that would be presumably available in any games going forward. You have your defense number, the target number for creatures that you attack with weapons. Defense is a range from 0 to 25. Most people have a defense score of 10. Anything capable of defending itself has a defense. Anything incapable of defending itself has a defense score of 0. Armor and shield, defensive talents and traits, and other effects can increase your defense. So this is similar to how defense is handled in the other Shadow games. You have your health score. Your health score is handled the same way in this iteration as it has in previous games. Your typical person has a health of 5. You also have damage, handled the same way as it does in previous games. Then you have a description of injured, which is handled the same way here as it is in other Shadow games. Injured is something that is sometimes utilized with certain talents or with certain spells, or certain monster abilities trigger off of the injured state. Incapacitated is when your damage equals your health score. And that's when you fall down and you begin to deteriorate until you die, and then you have death here. So, all of this is similar to how it's handled with Shadow the Demon Lord and Shadow the Weird Wizard. Now, we have something new here called Courage. You have a Courage score, and I've included that in my character sheet here as well. And your Courage score, again, is something that is new to the game. So let me just read it real quick. You have a Courage score, the maximum amount of horror that you can accumulate before you are uncontrolled. A typical person has 5 Courage. Your Courage score can increase and decrease. If your Courage score drops below your horror total, then your horror total drops until it equals your new Courage score. If your Courage score drops to 0, you die. Okay, so how do you interpret that? It's another form of health. So now you have, this is kind of like your mental health, whereas this is kind of like your physical health. So your Courage score is like your health score, and then your horror accumulates like damage accumulates. So if you're in a, say, like a Call of Cthulhu type of setting, and you encounter a lot of horrifying things, then you will accumulate horror, which will chip away at your character's mental state, which is defined by their courage. And then once the horror matches the courage, then bad things start happening to you. If your Courage score ever drops down to 0, then you die, just like if your health score ever drops down to 0, then you die there. Okay, so it helps me to visualize. That's why I created the character sheet. So you have horror talked about here. When your horror total equals or exceeds your Courage score, then you're shaken. Shaken means that some traits, talents, and other effects interact with the state of being shaken, as noted in the descriptions. When your horror total equals or exceeds half your Courage. So this is like the injured state up here, except it's for your mental well-being rather than your physical well-being. Then you have uncontrolled. So once your once your horror equals your Courage, Then you become uncontrolled. When you become uncontrolled, discard any horror taken in excess of your courage score. While uncontrolled, you are stunned, just like while you are incapacitated, or while you're, uh, when your damage equals your health score, you become incapacitated. This is the mental version of that. You're uncontrolled. While uncontrolled, you are stunned. At the end of each round, roll a d6. On a 1, you lose 1d6 courage. On a 2 to 5, nothing happens. And on a 6, you heal 1 horror. So this emulates the physical conditions described by your health and damage for your mental condition. Then you have your speed score, your movement traits, which include things like burrowing, climber, flyer, malleable, mount, silent, slippery, strider, swimmer, and unfettered. Size is pretty much the same as the previous games. Reach is pretty much the same as your previous games. And then you have temporary traits. Now, temporary traits you might get from, conditions or afflictions, from technology, from magic. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. The bad ones are called afflictions, the good ones are called fortunes. Afflictions are harmful traits, fortunes are beneficial ones. When you gain a temporary trait, you apply its effects immediately, and those effects persist until it ends as described in the temporary trait's source, or some other effect ends it. You can stack them, compound temporary traits, and it goes into the various traits here. For afflictions, a lot of these are similar to what we have in previous games. Blinded, charmed, confused, controlled, cursed, deafened, enraged, frightened, held, impaired, ongoing damage, poisoned, prone, removed. So I'm not sure if removed has been in previous games. You leave your space and appear in some featureless extra-dimensional space. Your perception drops to 0. You return to the space that you last occupied or the empty space nearest to that space when this affliction ends. So that, I think, is a different one. Stunned, unconscious, vulnerable, and weakened. Then you have fortunes, which are the positive traits. Accelerated increases your speed by 2. Blessed makes you make luck rolls with a boon. Enhanced means that it affects a particular trait. You could be perception enhanced or intellect enhanced, which means that you roll with 1 boon when making an action roll using this trait. And you impose 1 bane on action rolls made against your enhanced trait. Hastened means that you increase your speed by 2, similar to accelerated. However, it also increases the number of actions and reactions that you can use in a round by 1. So this fortune actually affects your action economy. Finally, you impose 1 bane on action rolls against your defense and your agility. So this is a more beneficial fortune from accelerated. Then invisible. Extended effort talks about resting, what happens when you rest. Travel talks about traveling. Pace, force marching, rough terrain, using mounts and vehicles. Then we have a section on chases, obstacles, critical successes and failures, effects of speed, other activities, and multiple chases, and then using your senses. Talks about becoming lost down here. Talks about sound, talks about illumination. All of this is very similar to the other games, which is why I'm kind of breezing through it. Obscurement, same. Shadows, darkness, hidden creatures and objects. Then we talk about knowledge. So knowledge, I think, is a way of handling the basics for what was handled as professions in the other iterations of the Demon Lord engine. So this talks about having expertise. You have 1 or more areas of expertise. Expertise could be on subject matter such as history of a region, or astronomy, or a language you've learned beyond your native tongue. It could also be professional training. Your expertise confers the following benefits: recall stories and legends related to your area of expertise, perform action or activities related to your expertise. Also, you can perform tasks demanding the specialized training you possess. Um, possess competence in all areas of your expertise you can provide for yourself by engaging in an occupation related to one or more areas of expertise. Identify the quality of any product or service related to your area of expertise, and then perform tasks that would normally be deemed difficult or impossible without the expertise. The GM considers your expertise when determining the outcomes of actions you describe and possibly granting an automatic success or one boon or more. And then it talks about obscure information and how to handle that. Then we go into objects. Not really going to go into a lot here because this is very similar to how it's handled in the other iterations of the Demon Lord game. Talks about what common objects are, digging and excavation. Then we get into hazards like acid, buried, corruption, deprivation. Then we talk about corruption. You have a corruption table here, which is handled differently than it is in Demon Lord. In Demon Lord, you have a corruption score, but in this game, you have a corruption score. Let me back up. In Demon Lord, you have a corruption score that once your corruption reaches a certain level, then you roll on the corruption table to determine what kind of dark mark you get. I'm going by memory here, so I could be a little bit off on this. And once your corruption score reaches your wisdom score, or your will score, then you lose control of your character and your DM takes over. This is similar, but the corruption effects are defined more specifically here. So once you get a score of 1 corruption, and I think I included corruption. Yeah, I have boxes to check off here for corruption in my character sheet. So when you get to 1 corruption, then you experience dark thoughts all the time. You have obscene fantasies, and sometimes you feel as if you will act on them. Then it just gets progressively worse. The worst one is here, number 9. Once you have 9 corruption, then you're beyond redemption. You become a monster in your flesh. Control over the character passes from you to the GM as you become a threat to everyone. So that's how it's handled in the future iterations of this game. All right, talks about disease and parasites, dismemberment, exposure, how to handle falling. Talks about fire. Then we have a section on gravity, which of course is not something that is talked about in Demon Lord or in Weird Wizard. It also talks about mutation, which is not talked about in Demon Lord or Weird Wizard. So this will go towards probably a more of a science fiction or a gamma world type of potential game, future game. Then we have poisons, precipitation, radiation, sleeping, smoke, suffocation, transformation, traps. Talks about a vacuum, which again is more of a sci-fi thing. Water, wind, the effects of wind. Then we talk about communication. We have different ways of communicating, such as language, obfuscation, translation, pantomime, eavesdropping, lip reading, reading scripts, deciphering codes. All right, then we get into some optional rule here with character bonds. So if you want your characters to have a bond, you can incorporate this optional rule. Disposition. Let's see, what else do we have here? Okay, then we get into action roles in social situations, which is kind of like that social combat. And then we get into the combat section. Combat section is pretty much the same as it is for Shadow of the Weird Wizard, utilizing the same initiative system that Weird Wizard uses, in that the monsters go first unless the characters take the initiative, and taking the initiative utilizes your reaction. All right, so it talks about moving in combat, difficult terrain, being moved, moving through creatures, moving out of reach. You still have free attacks in this game. What else? the action economy, or the different things you can do as an action: attack, defend, disarm, end an effect, feint, find, help, hide, hinder, overcome, ready, retreat, rush. Again, all of this is very similar to the other iterations of the game. You have reactions, free actions, and then we get into the weapons. Now the weapons are very quickly and high level provided here. You have what's referred to as simple weapons. So simple weapons just give you basic categories of weapons and what the damage would do, what grip is required, and what the range would be if they are a ranged weapon. So it goes from small melee to medium melee to large melee, then small range to medium range to large range. So you could say a dagger is a small weapon melee, a pistol is a small ranged weapon. Maybe a dart gun, I should say. A medium ranged weapon might be, I don't know, a crossbow. I don't know. Not really sure how to apply this. I'm still trying to wrap my brain around that, but it gives you at least a framework of how weapons could work in any genre. Circumstantial effects are listed here as well. Attacking with two weapons is addressed. Attacking with an item is addressed. Targeting objects, targeting specific locations, unarmed attacks. You have strike, grab, drag, strangle, shove, trip, wrestle. Then you have the specific attack options, such as disrupting attack, driving attack, and so on. Talks about aerial combat, aqua combat, mounts, vehicles. And then you have your enemy sheet, which talks about how the stat block would look and what the various categories mean. Talks about difficulty, and it has your descriptors down here. Size and speed, languages, immune, what that means, special traits, what those would mean. Then it does call out Fury here. So Fury was introduced in Shadow of the Weird Wizard, and so it's brought over into these future games as well. We have attacks and attack riders, and special actions and reactions. And then that's it. Then we have the index. So that is pretty much the Demon Lord engine. Very basic in some ways. All the core rules are here, and yet there's a lot of stuff missing that you'll need to actually play a game in a specific setting. However, an enterprising GM would be able to take this and create your own setting. Obviously using the other Schwab games as your template. So if I wanted to make my own Dresden Files game, which I would love to make, then I could probably utilize this and steal the magic system either from Weird Wizard or from the Demon Lord, or maybe even create my own in order to supplement a modern fantasy game. So anyway, there you go. That's the Demon Lord engine rules. My take on it. I could be wrong on anything that I said. So take what I said as just one GM's perspective based on a read through of these rules. We will find out more as Schwab produces more stuff for the Demon Lord engine. But I did want to cover this. So let me know your thoughts. Give me some comments and give me your perspective on what this means for Schwab Entertainment going forward. All right, with that, I'm going to finish this up, and I want to thank you all for watching once again. Hail the Demon Lord and all that. And how the hell you turn this damn thing off?